we are supported by Isotoner. Listen, spring is right around the corner. I know, I can't believe it either. And I have the perfect hot tip to share with you for this transition time between that cold winter weather and the beautiful spring sunshine that we've all been waiting for. And that is the Sweater Knit Sheila Clog Slipper from Isotoner. I love these things. The Sheila Clog is like a cozy knit slipper, and it's made with this super soft velour inside, and it has this extra heel cushion built in, so they're so comfy. And they have those indoor-outdoor soles, so you can run to the mailbox or go check on something on the patio without having to change into your real shoes. Love it. So for the next 2 weeks, my friends at Isotoner are giving our listeners 35% off of any style of slipper. Just head over to isotoner.com and use the code BRILLIANT35. Happy spring, my friends. I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 229 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, and my guest today is Emily Thomas of Cultivate What Matters. So my friends, if you are into planning or intentionality or pretty things, you are going to absolutely love the conversation that I have with my guest today. Emily Thomas is the chief of staff at Cultivate What Matters. And I first learned about this company when I probably got an ad on Instagram for their Write the Word journals. It is a very simple devotional that gives you one short verse or piece of scripture that you can write out by hand, and then, gives you a little bit of space to do some reflection on and maybe a few words about what's going on that day or gratitude. And I found that devotional years ago to be so simple and freeing in that it was not dated. So it didn't require me to do it every single day. And yet, as I did date particular entries and I can go back through them, it is such a window into what I was feeling and thinking at the time that I found that devotional. Now, it turns out Write the Word devotionals are not their core product. Their core product is actually something called Power Sheets. And so the next introduction I got to this company was through a lot of the women who I've coached who use Power Sheets and really love the simplicity of them as a way to not be so much in a day planner mindset, but more in a priorities mindset. So I think that you are going to really love and feel the similarities between the mission and the values of Cultivate What Matters as compared to those of Brilliant Balance. In other words, if you like what we're doing around here, you are probably going to like what Emily has to say today. So the company was founded by Laura Casey. Laura actually has had, she's like the cat with 9 lives. She's had a number of different professional chapters, one of which was running a magazine called Southern Weddings. And that's actually where she started working with Emily. And then Emily has stayed with her for more than 11 years and now serving as the chief of staff of Cultivate. So this conversation was fantastic. I thoroughly loved hearing both the peek behind the scenes into her own life. Emily is the mother of 3 young children. She's married to her high school sweetheart, and she writes a personal blog that we'll link in the show notes called M for Marvelous. So she's just delightful. I think you're really going to get a lot out of this conversation. Without further ado, here is my guest, Emily Thomas. So Emily, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thrilled to be here. It's a joy.
So something fun that I like to do with guests is get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain about what your life looks like in the format of, tell us about today. What's on your schedule? Where are you recording from? All that stuff.
Absolutely. So I woke up about 7:30 today. I'm a later riser, got my 3 kids ready for school alongside my husband. We have a 6, 3, and 6-month-old. We split up the school drop-offs. We are at 3 different schools right now for our kids. So I took the youngest 2 and he took our elementary age daughter's school. And then I drove into the office. I am in the Cultivate offices about 1 day a week and working from home the other 4. So listen to a podcast on my way in. And then when I got into the office, we have a marketing team meeting once a week. So I had that. And then I was working actually on some text for the 2023 Power Sheets. So that's fun. And then after this call, I'm going to work on a couple future blog posts. And then I wrap up at 3:00 here. I will call my mom on the way home. We talk once a week on my commute. It's perfect kind of overlap with those 2 things. Pick up all 3 of the kids, snacks, after school stuff, hopefully playing outside if it's not too cold. And then dinner, bath time. My oldest daughter and I are reading chapter books before she goes to bed. So we will hopefully read a little of A Little House on the Prairie as our current read.
Fun.
And then just relaxing with my husband. That's about it.
And that's all. That's it for today, y'all. Right. I know. When we tell people pick 3 things you're going to do, and then you're like, unless we're going to have 42. And that is life, right? With working and small kids, if you don't have a rhythm and a bit of structure around it, nothing ever gets done. So we are very fond of saying what gets scheduled gets done around here. And I think you probably live that out.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Awesome. So tell us a little bit in like your own words, what does it mean to cultivate what matters, since that's the name of the company?
To me, cultivating what matters means to kind of give my best, the best parts of me, the best I have to offer to what really matters to me in the big picture. So not what matters to anyone else. And I think also in the word cultivating, like inherently there is grace, right? It doesn't mean that we need to put in a huge amount of effort or take a huge leap to see results, but instead with consistency and tending little by little over time, we will kind of see the results that we want.
I love it. That kind of gardening analogy in Cultivate.
All about
too.
those.
Yes. And it kind of shows up in a lot of places through the Cultivate site and the stories I know that I've heard. I know we said this in your bio, but tell the listeners, how long have you been there? How did you find your way to this company?
Yeah. So I have, I believe this July, it'll be 14 years for me, which is crazy. And I actually started working with Laura when she was running Southern Weddings magazine. So after I graduated from school, I knew I wanted to work at a wedding magazine. So I moved down south to do that with her. And it was just her and me and one other gal at the time. So very small. So did that full time for 7 or so years. And then after the 10th anniversary of the magazine, we decided it was time to kind of close that half of the business and focus on the other side that had been growing and growing, and that was Cultivate. And so everyone who was working on the magazine switched over to kind of similar roles on the Cultivate side. And so I have been doing Cultivate only for the last 4 or 5 years now. And my role has kind of switched along the way, but I have done a lot of creative direction stuff. So working on our visuals and photo shoots. And then right now I'm really focused on the content side of things. So I do a lot of the teaching work through things like this, written blog posts and resources and materials, as well as writing the actual products that you might have in your hands, like the Power Sheets.
So that's so fascinating because there's so many products, which we'll get into a little bit. So people listening have a good sense of what is behind Cultivate. But go back for a minute and tell me the origin story. So you said, you were working at Southern Weddings with Laura Casey, who's the founder, and ultimately, there was another piece of the business that sort of was taking on a life of its own. Tell us the story of how that happened and how Cultivate came to be a standalone business.
Sure. Well, tell a little bit of Laura's story, since obviously as the founder, it's a big part of what we do and who we are. So she has lived many business lives over the years. She's been a personal trainer. She's been a wedding planner, a wedding magazine publisher, obviously, business coach, a branding expert. So lots of different things that it's kind of neat to see how they've all pulled together into where we are now. But way back in like 2009, she wrote a blog post, which sounds like so quaint these days, but I think the title was something like How I Make Things Happen or How to Make Things Happen. And it was really just this spark that like electrified people. And so out of that blog post, she started teaching content that grew into the Making Things Happen conference. She traveled around the country for 10 years teaching that, kind of started out with creative entrepreneurs and grew to a wider base of women mostly. And a few years into MTH, we saw the need, women were coming up with these priorities that they wanted to pursue, and they needed a tool that would help them tend to them, in conferences and things like that. And so that's really where the Power Sheets grew out of. It was a need in our people's lives and our own lives. And so that was our first offering of a physical product that we had. At the time, it was called the Laura Casey Shop. And then a few years into that, we switched the name to Cultivate What Matters, because we really wanted to tell stories just beyond Laura's story. We wanted to celebrate the people that were our community. And so that was many years ago now. And, the tools and the teaching have kind of grown since then, but that's where I started.
So from making things happen to how to enable making those things happen, and Power Sheets was the first vehicle to do that. So tell people listening, what are Power Sheets? What's the concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So Power Sheets are a goal planner. If you've heard of that, they are different from a daily planner where you have like a page each day. They do have a monthly calendar component, but most people don't use that most people use it in addition to either a digital calendar or another paper planner. And there are 3 parts to them. So the first part is a real vision casting, a series of guided, thoughtful questions that really help you determine your big picture vision for your life. That's called the prep work. And it's perhaps most people's favorite part of the Power Sheets, because we don't have the opportunity to sit with questions like that very often in our lives. And then the second section is where you actually set goals based on the vision that you just worked on and kind of brought to light. And then the last section is the monthly planning pages. So the tending list is in there, if you've ever heard of that term. And that's kind of where you can choose your priorities for the month and then work on them little by little. It incorporates a lot of things like habit tracking, and we do a lot of teaching around breaking down goals and all of that. But the monthly pages are where you have a chance to reflect on the progress you've made, to make a plan for going forward, and then that tending list to kind of keep it all together.
That's awesome. So as somebody who, I'm sure you use these tools since you help run the company, tell me, how do you set your priorities? Well, how do you decide what is important to cultivate personally?
Yeah. My answer here is either a cop-out or what you would expect, but it is the Power Sheets. I think that just that opportunity to, obviously I've been doing Power Sheets for many years now. And so I have a very clear, big picture vision for my life. But even still, having that annual check-in on, okay, this is where I've been going. This is the direction that I'm heading. Is this still relevant for my life? Does this still align with what I want and what my family needs and what I need? And so that right there is just invaluable. And then I think monthly, having that reminder that I can choose and I have the choice, but I cannot do it all. And so often the things that add depth and beauty and fun and joy to my life, they are not things that anyone else is going to chase me down to make sure I'm doing. It's not like a bill that someone is, going to make sure I pay. And so it's on me to make sure that those things happen and to have that reminder monthly, and also a tool to facilitate that has just been so helpful in my own life.
I think there's 2 threads I want to pick up from what you just said, because I think they're really interesting. One is that notion of there's not a lot of reward coming my way other than the intrinsic reward, or doing some of the things that really make life worth living or make me feel healthy and whole. Right. And I've been talking with my kids about the notion of currency, that, when you're in school, a lot of what drives your behavior is am I getting credit for this? Right. Maybe we do volunteer hours because they're tracked, or maybe we study because there's a grade coming. Right. And then as an adult, that translates to financial rewards or, prestige. What's your sense of how we can harness some sort of currency or motivator for the things that don't naturally align with that? Because I agree with you, they're super important, but they seem to fall to the bottom, maybe because there's not a currency for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think we do like to kind of nerd out on neuroscience as we're building our projects and so our products. So we certainly incorporate everything that we can into them, things with brain wiring, and our brains are wired. Even there's been studies that have run that checking things off is provides motivation to keep going and keep doing things. So that certainly is built into the Power Sheets as much as we can. That being said, I think that all of this is an uphill battle for exactly the reasons that you've said. I think we live in a really loud, urgent world where there are things screaming at us from every direction, and also a world that rewards instant gratification, right? We love that end result, that flashy kind of thing that we can share with people. And when I think about some of the things that I'm working on in my power sheets, there are things, with my kids or whatever, that I might not see the payoff for years, like until they're teenagers or adults.
Like reading Little House on the Prairie.
Yes, exactly. And then kind of related to that too, I think just a reason this is challenging is that we don't live in a world that really prioritizes reflection in many pockets. We are used to consuming, and even like on social media, consuming other people's opinions and thoughts and lives, that it's really hard to even know what matters to us, right? And so before we can cultivate what matters, we need to be able to name what matters. So I think that's a big challenge as well.
I'm dancing with that one big time. And I think I'll continue to for a while, that notion of, do we want to create currency for that? Do we want to create, and I'm using currency like in air quotes, for those behaviors, or is the whole point that there isn't, and how do we acknowledge that some things in life need to be honored that we're not getting any external credit for, right? They don't seem to count. Sort of the Brene Brown idea of play, right? Play does not have an obvious reward.
One thing we do talk about a lot is that obviously we are a goal setting company, and many of our people are working on really long-term goals, but something that we really emphasize kind of to that point is that there has to be celebration along the way. And you have to find something to love about the life you're living right now. It can't be all like, oh, when I, accomplish this goal or do this thing or get to the end of the year. So even in the power sheets, there's prompts built in as you're kind of planning out your goals. How will I celebrate along the way? How will I make this fun along the way? Because if it's all just out there in the future and there's nothing to enjoy along the way, then you're going to stop, you're going to give up. So.
Right. Or you're not going to have very much fun.
No. And that's not what life's about.
No. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. I said there were 2 threads I wanted to pull. So the other one was, what has changed in your choices or priorities, maybe in the last year or the last 2 years? We're all kind of 2 years into COVID. Can you look at something really specific? Because you said, is what I was doing still serving me? Do I want to make a change? Is there an example of something that has changed?
Yeah, one that came to mind, I had our 3rd daughter was born last year in the middle of the year. And so this is a little bit of a smaller scale example, but last year it was a cocooning year in many ways. My husband also tore his Achilles tendon. So we were both kind of down in the dumps physically last year. And it was not a year to exercise, really. It was not a year where we were doing a lot of the active adventures that, are usually a part of our kind of family culture. And then one of my goals that I set for 2022 was around kind of fitness and wellness and all of that. And it was nice to be able to see that I had a lot of grace with myself of that was the story of this year. There's a different story for this year that I'm in a different season now. My daughter's a little older. And so kind of helping name those stories, give a narrative to it has been so helpful for me, instead of being down on myself for, not exercising more or whatever it might be last year, but instead naming that season, honoring it for what it is, and then acknowledging that I'm moving into a new season where I can have different priorities.
There's maybe something in there about realigning your expectations of yourself, because it's so much suffering, right? When our expectations are outdated, and then our reality is not going to keep up with that. So the Achilles tendon, if he was this is my triathlon year, and then he, rips his Achilles tendon, there's a lot of pain in that gap between expectations. So I like this tool, and it's something we certainly encourage in Brilliant Balance, as a way to constantly realign your expectations, not so much to let yourself off the hook, but to be realistic. And I use the word honor all the time, right? Just to honor the reality of the chapter or the season that you may be in. So I love that example.
Well, I could not love that more. Anyone who has talked to me for more than like 5 minutes, I probably have brought up expectations and how important they are in my life, because I have just seen over and over again. And even the newborn phase really makes me think of it. Like I have had very joyful newborn seasons with each of my kids. And I think it's because before I had kids, I was not a baby person at all. And so I had like extremely low expectations of like, this is going to be hard. I'm not going to sleep. This is going to be painful. And then it left space for me to be delighted by what actually happened instead of setting the bar up here and, always falling short of it. So throughout my life, I have totally seen that importance.
I love that. So let's shift from you to maybe the women you have a lens on. When you think about the community within Cultivate, what are a couple of things you see women really struggling with the most when it comes to, I guess we call it managing their time sort of generically, or setting priorities? What are the biggest struggles?
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind is like the all or nothing mentality. We have a phrase that if you've spent any time at Cultivate, you have surely heard of little by little adds up, or little by little progress adds up. And that has just become a touchstone, and really something that when people are coming into the brand can speak to them a lot, because it can be life-changing if you really embrace it. We just underestimate, we're so quick to be like, oh, I don't have time for that goal or, project, whatever it might be. But if we just committed to spending 15 to 30 minutes a day on something, it is amazing how much progress we can see if we do that consistently, instead of, giving up after 2 days of 15-minute progress where we didn't see any immediate results. And obviously some goals do require larger chunks of time. Like if you're going to run a marathon, you are going to need to put in some longer training runs, but so much of what we want in life can be accomplished in these small pieces if we're willing to stick with them.
I love it. And you're right. I mean, all or nothing thinking is like, you just see it. It's sort of the diet mentality, or the, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. So much gets abandoned prematurely under that. I'm curious, how do you find out what's on the minds of your community? Like, where do you source the ideas for to say, okay, this is a problem we see, we're going to meet it with a training or a product? How do you learn?
We try to be really good listeners. So in our kind of job descriptions for especially our social media gals and our customer delight ladies is bringing customer insights to the rest of the team. And so in a very practical way, daily, the expectation is that they'll be dropping those into our Slack channel so that the whole team can kind of see them in real time, see what our customers are thinking and feeling and struggling with, and where they are succeeding and whatever that might be. So we can pivot things like our messaging, our content that we're putting out on our blog, very quickly. And then we also, of course, do things like an annual brand survey, and we always do surveys after big events. And with new products, we always want to see, like, is this solving the pain point that made you buy it? Are you using it in the way we thought you were going to use it, or using it in some way we didn't expect you to use it? How could we improve it? All of that. So we're very intentional about gathering the insights, but then also using them in the product development process. So the first step in our process, we've gotten into trouble sometimes of coming up with an idea first before it was connected to a pain point of our community. And, those are usually the products that just don't succeed because they're not hooked into what our people need. So we've tried to learn that lesson and we spend a lot of time on it. So it was definitely a priority for us.
It is interesting how the notion of designing from the actual interest of the consumer or the client, or if you're really listening and saying, what do you want? Okay, let me go make that for you. It feels like, I used to work for Procter & Gamble, and that was a huge part of product development cycle, even in a giant CPG company, was, are we listening to what they're saying? They don't. And sometimes you have to leapfrog that, and, they don't know they need it until you tell them. But sometimes it is so much magic in what they're saying. Wouldn't it be great if we could just do this? I love that. And I love the proliferation of products that I've seen. I want you to tell the listeners about the phone bag, because this might be my favorite little product that's on your site.
Yeah, so that actually grew out. So the phone bag it's very simple. It's just like a muslin, cute, screen printed bag that is sized to fit a cell phone. And so that grew out of, again, that Making Things Happen conference that we did for many years. At the entrance, before people went into the ballroom for the conference, we had them put their phones in a box that was kept in the hallway. We had volunteers that were like monitoring them, if, had an emergency number, all that stuff, but they did not have them with them in the ballroom for 2 full days of the conference. And year after year, that feedback of like, I didn't know that I needed the space to breathe and how much of a distraction it was in all of these different ways was just like almost more than like the content of the conference. That was like what stuck with people, of just having that time apart from their phone and all of the things that are connected to their phone. And so when we, in the last few years, we've moved our conference online that we do at the end of the year. And, in the materials before the conference, we always encouraged people to, put their phone away, to turn it off. But kind of out of that and out of this resounding just impact that putting your phone away can have, came this very humble little product. And even if there are research studies that show how often people pick up their phone if they can see it versus if they cannot see it, or if it's face down versus face up. And so that was a big eye opener too for us.
Yes. And it's funny because, Ariana Huffington talks about making a little bed for your phone, right? To put it away at night. And we've picked up on that in our 30 Days to Vibrant Energy program of how can you get your phone away from you at nighttime so that you're not tempted to, because it's so subconscious to turn over. Yeah. But I like this concept of the little bag. It's just like this cute little bag that your phone would drop into. Like, I think it even has like a drawstring on the top. Mm-hmm. Yep. And even if it were in your handbag that way, when you go to reach for it, you're like, oh, right. I said I was going to put this barrier for a minute. Yes. Just that little bit of behavioral psychology, which is genius, right? Sometimes it's
like putting a snack up on a high shelf.
Yes, on a high shelf. That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, oh yeah, it's just one little deterrent. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, there's so many great ideas at Cultivate, all rooted in this concept of keeping what matters front and center and enabling you to do that through really practical tools. Can you just tell our listeners where they can find Cultivate online?
Sure. We are at cultivatewhatmatters.com. And then that is our handle on pretty much every social platform as well. We have not gotten onto TikTok, but.
And Emily, you have your own online presence. So since everyone has had a chance to get to know you, where can they find you online?
Sure. I have a personal blog called M for Marvelous, like EM. And if you enjoy Cultivate, if you're a user of our products, you probably will enjoy it. And I think it's kind of neat because obviously with writing the teaching for much of Cultivate, I live it myself, but it's kind of, my blog offers a chance to see a personal take on many of the things we teach to our community. So that is there if you'd like to visit.
So fun. So I checked it out and it's so fun. So we're going to do a quick speed round to wrap up the interview. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
So first question is, what makes you feel brilliant?
Well, I am an Enneagram 5. So I feel brilliant when people take my advice. But I unsurprisingly spend a lot of time thinking about systems and processes and making things better. And then even more time kind of writing about those things and sharing them. And so it is very gratifying when people take the time to write me and tell me something made a difference in their life.
Awesome. What is your favorite time-saving or productivity hack?
Batching. I use it especially for relationship stuff. Like I have one day a month where I sit down and write birthday cards and buy birthday presents and plan celebrations for my family and all that kind of stuff, and really try to both strategize and execute on one day. And that has been a game changer for me.
Love it. What have you learned to say no to?
In this season, I am saying a lot of no's to social media. I sign on about once a week and then do like a monthly kind of roundup on stories of what we've been up to. And I feel like I'm actually one of the only people in the world who wants to spend more time on social media, because I've just spent a lot of time like curating the people that I follow and I want to learn from them and know what they're up to. But it just is not the priority in this particular season.
What's one big dream that you're chasing right now?
At the risk of sounding very cheesy, I feel like I am living my dream right now versus chasing something. I have, like I said, I have young kids. I have a 6, 3, and 6-month-old. And I have a husband I adore and a job that I love. And every day I get to wake up and love them and teach them and make magic for them. And that is just where my heart is right now.
So great. So great. And then what is a song that you turn on when you need to get in the zone?
Okay. So since most of my work is writing, I cannot listen to anything. I need like silence when I am working. But if I want to pump myself up, I really love the song Dancing on My Own by Robin. Good
So
one.
great. So great. I love the variety of the answers to that question, like across all podcast guests. It's fantastic. Well, Emily, you are a delight. Thank you for being with us and sharing your time and your wisdom and some of your personal story. Everyone go check out Cultivate What Matters at the link. We'll put it in the show notes, and check out Emily's blog as well. And I hope you take something away from today's interview that really helps you get grounded in what matters to you and how will you tend to that. That gardening metaphor is all throughout their stuff. I think you can really hear it even in the way you speak, which is terrific. And I am taking away birthday day. I thought that was a fantastic little hot tip on once a month, consolidate all of the stuff for the people that you love. Celebrations, I would maybe lump in there. That's a fantastic hot tip. Okay. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a joy.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening to all of the wisdom that Emily was here to share. I know that there were things that I learned. Hopefully you did too. We're able to jot down a note or two on something that you can take away and implement right away. We will link up all of Emily's websites for you in the show notes so that you can find them. And in the meantime, if you are new to the Brilliant Balance Show or new to this community, come join us in the Brilliant Balance Facebook group. Just go to Facebook, search groups for Brilliant Balance, and we will welcome you in to the conversation that's underway there. You can also follow along on Instagram, which remember is probably how I found Cultivate in the first place. We are at brilliant_balance, or you can find me at C Skolnicki. Thanks for tuning in today. That's all for today. Till next time, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is the podcastfactory.com.